Good evening. This is a joint meeting of the Molalla City Council and Planning Commission for November 19th, 2025. I'd like to remind all participants that Robert's Rules of Order will be enforced in this meeting. Audience members, we request that you silence your cell phones and not conduct side conversations during the meeting. Thank you. And would you please join me in the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We will go to roll call, starting with Commissioner Ansel.
Commissioner Ansel, present.
Commissioner Ornelas present.
Commissioner Sharp, present.
Planning Chair Eaglebearer present.
Counselor Basinius, present.
Council President Vermillion present.
Mayor Kaiser present.
Counselor Childers present.
Counselor Schenkel, present.
Counselor Gummer present.
Commissioner Ricky present.
Commissioner Potts present.
Associate Planner Clarissa Davis present.
Planning Manager Dan Zinder present.
And Dan Huff, City Manager.
City Recorder Christy Teets, present.
All right, thank you. Up next, we will do public comment. Citizens are allowed up to 3 minutes to present information relevant to the city, but not listed as an item on the agenda. Prior to speaking, citizens shall complete a comment form and deliver it to the city recorder. The city does not generally engage in dialogue with those making comments, but may refer the issue to the city manager. Complaints shall be first addressed at the department level prior to addressing the city council. Do we have any forms tonight, Christy?
Thank you, Mayor. There is no audience present. However, council and commission have received public comment on 2 submissions that I received earlier today.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Our first discussion tonight will be mobile food units, code amendment discussion. Mr. Zinder, is this yours?
I'll start it off and I'll be passing off to Carson in a moment. But yeah, so as I'm sure many of you are aware, 4 years ago, the city has adopted food cart standards for mobile food units for the first time. So we've now had 4 years to work with these standards, and we've had a handful of applications come through and gotten a sense of what's sort of working with them and what's not working with them. And as mobile food units are a vital part of any downtown community, any commercial community, we'd like these things to be humming pretty well, and they could be anchor businesses in your community. So we want to make the process for getting them as streamlined, and we've heard some comments and concerns from the council community regarding these standards, and felt it was time to revisit them. So with that, particularly with regards to how we look at mobile food units coming on already developed properties, 1 or 2 units that want to go into someone's parking lot or something of that nature, how we look at that, and then how we making sure we're not duplicative of other standards that are happening, and then also looking more clearly defining what under what circumstances we are looking at a design review. So that's sort of the general framework that we were looking at, and I'll turn it over to Associate Planner Clarissa Davis to tell you what we're thinking. And I'll put up a graphic that she designed that shows what we're thinking.
Thank you, Dan. This is also in your packet as well, so if you'd like to see it closer to you, you are welcome to look at it there. As Dan said, I'm here to speak with you about proposed mobile food unit amendments. Our goal today is to go over that document and to see if it aligns with Council's policy objectives. Our current code does not sufficiently distinguish between temporary and permanent mobile food units. It has duplicative standards, and it is confusing for community members and city staff to administer. The proposed amendments would reduce regulatory confusion in 3 main ways. The first way is that it would separate the land approval and the mobile food unit approval itself. Currently, our code combines these 2 processes, and staff proposed to separate them out to make it easier for people to use. First, a property would go through land use to prepare the land for a mobile food unit. Then, the unit itself would be approved during the business licensing process. This would also make it easier for mobile food units to be switched out if they wanted to leave a property, and that property would retain their approval and could easily have a new mobile food unit come in and work on that property. The mobile food unit would just need to be licensed through the business licensing program. The second way it would reduce regulatory confusion is that it would get rid of redundant standards. The existing code contains regulations that are already overseen by the Clackamas County Health Authority and the Molalla Fire District. Wading through all of these regulations that are already addressed by these other agencies is time-consuming and confusing. The proposed changes would defer to these agencies to ensure that the mobile food units are already met with these approvals. During the business license process, the city would confirm with the Clackamas County Health Authority and the Molalla Fire District to ensure that a unit had all of the required approvals before they would operate in the city. The third way that the proposed amendments would reduce regulatory confusion is that they would simplify the land use procedures for property owners into an accessory and primary use tract. So you can see this on the infographic. It kind of splits into those two columns. One side is for an accessory use, which is basically or more similarly to a food cart in an existing business's parking lot. This is a less burdensome tract as the property has already gone through development procedures that would make sure that things like system development charges have been paid and sidewalks have been created. Mobile food units on undeveloped property, or for more than 2 mobile food units on developed property, such as a food cart pod, have the potential to significantly increase impact on the properties in the city. It's important that we make sure that this increased impact doesn't have outstanding effects on our community. And we would ask that these go through a site design review to make sure that standard development procedures like dedicating public right-of-way and creating sidewalks is done, so that way there is not undue harm to the community in Molalla when these new lots have increased uses on them. The existing regulatory structure is often confusing and difficult for prospective mobile food unit property owners to navigate. These amendments would create a clearer, easier process while continuing to protect the public health and safety of Molalla. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to council for any questions.
All right. We'll do Robert's Rules of Order. If anybody would like to ask questions or comment, please raise your hand and I'll call on you. I hear crickets.
Hopefully that means I've done my job
Yeah.
well and
I
you're
think you've done very well.
understanding.
You did very well.
You did very well.
Did it?
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, is there any potential food carts that are in the, waiting to see if this could work in their favor? For instance, one lot type or one food cart on a parking lot type of situation?
Are you curious if there are people communicating with the Community Development Department about putting mobile food units on
Yes.
land currently? No. However, I have answered questions about mobile food units, and it is a confusing process to explain. So hopefully these amendments will make it more approachable for people.
Yeah, and I think there was a recent food, application that we went through, and I think it really highlighted these problems. Probably the one out in with Center Market, and the reason they're not up and running is not related to that at this point. They've gone through the city process and got what we needed. But something that we noticed is that it was really confusing for the property owner to say, and the applicant to say, who's responsible for what piece of this? Once the applicant once SDCs are paid, actually that's a benefit to the property owner. Whether they want another food cart on their property, whether they want to build another building, those STCs go forward with the property owner, and that wasn't, it was something that we actually had to explain to them in the application process, for example. And I think this process really susses it out. The property owner goes through your land use, and then at any point, that food cart can initiate the process of getting licensed in the city and then just has to find a location.
Chair Eaglebear?
Are these food carts going to be self-contained? Or are you expecting them to be connected to the systems?
So there are different ways that different cities have done that. And part of connecting to the system is that it does an increased strain on the system. And so what we have been talking about within the planning division and community development department is if a mobile food unit wants to connect and wants to increase that strain on city services, we are leaning towards allowing that, but requiring them to pay those system development charges. So a
To
little
my
bit of
point, if they're self-contained, then they're not putting a strain on the system, per se.
I misunderstood your question.
Yeah.
Some mobile food units request to connect to city services
Okay.
such as water and sewer.
Okay.
If a unit wanted to do that, we would potentially allow it, but would require them to pay for their strain on the services.
I see.
If they did not want to connect and wanted to, like you said, remain self-contained, they would not need to pay water and sewer charges.
Okay. Just trying to clarify.
No, thank you. That's a good thing to clarify.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I have one question on, so you have accessory use 1 and 2, and then you have primary use of pod. Are we going to separate if a group, like the accessory use 1 and 2, are they gonna be paying the SDCs at their current rate right now, which I believe is almost $8,000? I mean, I can understand the primary, if somebody's opening a pod and it's gonna be a bunch of food trucks, I mean, that's gonna be a strain on the system, because most likely if they're building it, they're gonna be hooking into our system. But on the accessory where, like, say someone is self-contained, like it was just discussed, are the SDC fees gonna be still, or are we gonna be looking at the SDC fees to be lowered for somebody that's not gonna be put on the system?
Yeah, that's a great point. So the way that we've been looking at this within the department is that if a mobile food unit is getting added to a property that has already been developed, that property has already paid SDC fees. And if, like Chairperson Eaglebear mentioned, they are going to be self-contained, there really is no system development charges to assess at that point. If that unit is looking to tie into city services, we would need to assess those charges. So the accessory use would likely not have those system development charges assessed.
Basically, we'd be looking for this temporary use permit, a type of temporary use permit, and there'd be probably an annual fee for that, but it would be less than the SDC charge.
Significantly less.
Yeah.
Now you got me wondering.
Wondering what?
When you say significantly less, I mean, I mean, have we talked about dollars and cents on that yet, or?
We'll come back to you.
Perfect. Thank you.
That's
Great
your
answer.
level, but yeah, we're
Yeah.
thinking lower, but yeah, that comes back in work session.
2 more weeks. Anybody else? All right, we will move on.
All right.
So, Christy, I did see that gentleman come in, and I guess I'll take it as my prerogative. I'll take their slips and we'll let them speak.
Yes, please. It's appropriate to do so during this topic.
Right. So, do you have their slips handy for me?
I can tell you that Corwin would be speaking first, and Jim will be speaking second.
Okay.
I have submissions from
Okay,
both of them.
perfect. Come on up, Corman. State your name and city you reside in for the record, please.
Yeah, my name is Corwin DeMeo. I live just outside city limits off of Rachel Washington. Yeah, thank you for the time, and thanks President Dan for always making time for Jim and I via email or in person. It's really appreciated. So yeah, my name is Corwin DeMeo. I've spoken at a number of city council meetings regarding the proposed UGB expansion, Oregon's Goal 14 factors, and the use of potentially flawed population data in the current planning process. I've discussed this at length before, but just as a quick review, The proposed UGB expansion relies on an outdated population forecast that's been heavily skewed by COVID-related statistical errors, which projected a significant growth increase in Molalla. A corrected forecast drastically lowered the projected population growth rate, almost eliminating any need for UGB expansion. Molalla is currently planning for a major UGB amendment based on a need which the PSU, Population Research Center, Oregon DAS, and DLCD all acknowledge does not exist. The city has continued planning using the incorrect numbers for pragmatic reasons that I fully understand and acknowledge to be valid. There are practical hurdles, staff time, grant conditions, bureaucratic issues, and a variety of other areas to consider. I do not want to relitigate the fundamental concerns I have for the use of the invalid population forecast. What I do want to ask is that you please consider engaging in some additional policy review and planning related to the current approach in order to ensure that the city is prepared with a resilient plan that is responsive to all contingencies. Specifically, I'm asking for a review of the systemic impacts of overexpansion and planning for alternatives if the current legislative amendment process being pursued with the governor's office fails. It may seem relatively harmless to simply move forward with the planning using the incorrect forecast numbers. Unfortunately, there's a body of research and scholarship which demonstrates that diverging from a data-driven approach results in adverse outcomes. Overexpansion of UGBs has a variety of regressive and damaging downstream impacts, functionally replicating the effects of poorly managed urban sprawl while compromising the core benefits of having a UGB in the first place. There are complex, largely negative impacts on land supply and demand. It encourages harmful speculation practices. There are novel 14 considerations, utility costs and burdens on existing taxpayers, harms to infill momentum and incentives, and damage to the environment and local economic diversity. I mention all of this largely because the sunk cost argument of money and time spent on the current plan is insignificant compared to the long-term social, environmental, and economic harms caused by overexpansion. The city also remains in talks with the governor's office related to the viability of a potential legislative amendment to bypass the existing planning process and pursue a partial or full northward expansion. While not specific to UGB or land use planning, the state of Oregon uses very basic tests to determine if exceptions, waivers, or exemptions meet reasonable standards before they are even considered for review. These tests vary, but generally include, at a minimum, a necessity test. If a city brought me a proposal for a large UGB expansion which circumvented the statutory planning and land prioritization process, and they informed me that the basis of their request was provably incorrect or inaccurate, that proposal would immediately fail the necessity test. I say this while fully acknowledging that if an expansion does occur, a northward expansion would be less disruptive. I'm simply concerned that the use of the invalid population data undermines the city's legal basis for a request for an exception. There's a non-zero chance that a legislative amendment pathway fails and the entire plan is remanded and put back in the standard DLCD pipeline. This would result in what amounts to be a worst-case scenario, a massive forced expansion into the exception lands to the south, using the original invalid and inflated population forecast. While my preference is that the city and DLCD discuss the viability of restarting the process with the correct numbers, my basic request is that additional analysis and planning be performed to ensure that the city has an established course of action in response to all eventualities. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Come on up, Tom. Or excuse me, Jim. Come on up, Jim. State your name and city you reside in, please, for the record.
Yes, I'm Jim Gilbert, and I've been making my living growing nursery stock in the Liberal area on Kramer Road, 28696 South Kramer Road, since 1982. So thank you for having this meeting and allowing us to talk with you. My comments are going to some degree echo what Corbin said. I'm a pretty strong advocate and supporter of Oregon agriculture, which is the second largest sector in Oregon's economy, employs thousands of people, brings in billions of dollars to our state. And even in our local area, we have thousands of acres of hazelnuts, berries, vegetable fields, livestock. Agriculture is a very big part of our local economy as well. And tonight I'm really just want to talk specifically about your planning process and how it could negatively affect agriculture in our area. I know you're involved in this planning process and you're working with numbers that you have from Portland State University and the population forecast numbers, the ones you're working with were created in 2020. They forecast a population increase of about 50% from 10,000 to 15,000 people in the next 20 years. But their numbers were revised in 2024 and now are about 50% less than those original numbers. I think that's it's a pretty important difference, and my strong encouragement to you is to consider using those new numbers, the updated ones, for several reasons. Of course, One is that I think it will help us, protect our air and water in the area. I'm sure some of you notice the long stream of cars that go south in the evening and north in the morning. Adding to that, some fewer cars, that might be nice as well. And also keeping the urban growth boundary where it is, or at least very close to it, which would be possible using those updated numbers, would keep our farmland together and hopefully growing food and other crops for generations to come. So that's basically my argument for this, and I think that you would get a lot of help, certainly from the local community, by moving in that direction. I would do whatever I could to help you do that as well. And I also just wanted to mention, it's something that I've done personally as part of my effort to support agriculture in Oregon. I helped make a documentary film about the history of how Oregon became this very unique state and how it protected its farmland, which it's been doing for over 50 years. You can go to the website, OregonStory.com, and watch a shorter or a longer version of this film. And it's a pretty amazing story, and I felt very honored to be able to interview and talk to people who had been doing this work for so long and defending our farmland. And here I am, 40 minutes south of Portland, surrounded by blueberries, hazelnuts, cows, and vegetables. So I'm pretty happy with that, and I think, by keeping our community more compact and following these revised numbers, we can help protect our rural, peaceful lifestyle. I suggest any of you wondering what might happen if we didn't do that, you could drive between Beaverton and Hillsborough anytime you want, and it's a pretty graphic example of uncontrolled growth. So. Again, thank you very much for your time, and let me know if there's any way I can work with you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you coming in. All right, our next topic will be urban growth boundary update. May I have your staff report, please?
All right, well, with that lead in, yeah, it's been a while since I last rapped at you guys about the urban growth boundary. We've been in a bit of a lull as far as the actual staff work that's happening, but as you know, a couple decisions have come back from DLCD about the flurry of work we had earlier, and so I just wanted to take some time to update both the commission and the council about the current state of our urban growth boundary amendment work plan, where we stand and where we're going, and what you can expect in the next couple of months, and then I'll also talk a little bit about the ONA comment that we made recently for the pending rules from DLCD about this process. So with that, to update, we had excuse me, seven-part work plan. The first, of course, being the work plan itself, which we completed back in March of 2023, council approval, got DLCD approval shortly after. From there, we started actually doing the meat of the work plan, with the first task being completion of the housing needs analysis, where we looked at where we did take those PSU numbers at that time from 2022 and looked at the forecasting, and then extrapolated that into housing of different density levels and types, while also evaluating how much of that could be accommodated by land within the urban growth boundary in the buildable lands inventory. So that was also completed in 2023. Third step, the housing production strategy. The ill-fated housing production strategy, currently on remand. So as a side note, this was part of the original work plan, has been taken out of the official work plan, but it's still state requirement, still requirement to complete housing needs analysis. So as you likely know, we received a remand note back in August with 4 conditions that we're to meet to get it. And we have 3J Consulting working on rewriting the document to get to those conditions. I'll get to what those are and what we're doing to meet those conditions in a moment. But we anticipate bringing first to council a draft in early January And then to bring those comments back, we'll also be meeting with the advisory committee of community members and builders in the area to provide feedback on it. And so then we'll bring a draft incorporating all that feedback sometime in February, one of the meetings in February, which would then put it for a hopefully spring approval from DLCD, late spring approval. Task 4, back into the work plan, was our economic opportunities analysis, where we evaluated both how much land, again with a buildable lands inventory of existing land in the urban growth boundary, and then looking at what types of businesses we may want court to come in and what we can likely expect. We completed that back in March of this year, 2025. Task 5, the efficiency measures, the bulk of that was a zoning change of a number of industrial parcels to residential parcels. This was based on findings from the economic opportunities analysis that we had a surplus of smaller industrial parcels. We're still looking potentially to get some larger parcels in our urban growth boundary expansion, but these smaller parcels have sat around in our urban growth boundary for years and years without development. And so that zone change was approved. There was a condition of that, which I'll talk about when I talk about our HPS, what we're doing in the HPS. Did I see a question, Eric, or Councilor Vermillion? No. Okay. Task 6 was the Goal 14 analysis, where we sort of took the findings from our economic opportunities analysis and housing needs analysis, looked at a study area surrounding the city, and started to look at feasible lands for urban growth boundary expansion to meet that need. So this process typically, looks through the prioritization through DLCD, looking at the exception lands, the non-resource lands first, and then urban reserves, of which we have none, and then low and high value farmland. So we finished that round in June of 2025. We've opened this question back up based on some comments from council, feedback from the community, and I'll talk about that a little more later, but we've reopened that up for an amendment to our Goal 14 analysis. And then, of course, so we anticipate that amendment coming back around also in February of 2026, maybe early March. I think because it's been about a week delayed. So, and then last is UGB adoptions, where we would actually propose UGB expansion, and we anticipate bringing that as applicable to council in June of 2026. So to talk a little bit about these housing production strategy revisions, the first condition was that this, and for the record, for this one, staff agreed with DLCD's comment that there's supposed to be an analysis of benefits and burdens to priority populations in each of for each of the proposed strategies, and so the DLCD said that we need a more robust analysis to that effect. Our consultants has been working on a table, so just to give you an example of what that would look like. For example, to develop standards for cottage clusters, we would say the intended benefit increases density with multiple small homes on a single lot, offering more affordable and diverse housing options, especially for senior and people, especially for seniors. And then the anticipated unintended burden would be all redevelopment runs the risk of displacing low-income renters. So maybe there's some existing housing that's getting demolished for it, that's getting priced out, both of properties being developed and in the surrounding neighborhood. So we would talk to those and then have a mitigation measures, planning and continued monitoring with addition to displacement of gentrifying areas, maintain a relationship with Clackamas County Health, Housing, and Human Services. So we're looking to maybe impacts of these projects as they occur, keeping databases, keeping Clackamas County, and this type of discussion was what DLCD was looking for in the original report. So TLCD petition number 2, discuss how we're incentivizing accessible and affording housing development. For that, we're looking at potentially developing another policy that would provide potential benefits such as density exceptions or parking exceptions for developing affordable and accessible units. So if a project is developing those as part of them, we would look at potential ways to ease standards to get there. I'm not convinced, you know, we started talking about parking allowances. I'm not convinced that there's really a good nexus there. I think we ought to talk to, consult with our TAC members. We have some really productive folks on our TAC that are in the development community that'll maybe provide feedback on some more targeted ways that we could do that. And, so that's something we're going to directly look for and as we go through this draft. And then DLCD condition number 3, identifying policies that incentivize affordable housing. So that doesn't necessarily mean new policies. It could be just really explaining about how existing policies and things that we came up with in our HBS address this. So again, the potential benefits question that we'll run by the TAC that applies to both condition 2 and 3. There is, and this gets back to the condition from our efficiency measures. One of the condition that came back from DLCD, it was raised by 1,000 friends and they agreed with it, was that by using the safe harbor method in our H&A, it anticipated a higher density level in R3 than we currently have. So we would be looking with our UGB amendment at increasing the density in R3 from 24 to 40 units as maximum, also 8 to 12, so it would be a 12 to 40 unit instead of 8 to 24. So that would only apply to the R3 zone, none of the other zones would be affected. I do wonder how many opportunities, especially with the, with some of the requirements for multifamily, how many opportunities how much demand there is for those type of projects in Molalla. But it would increase, the variety of projects that could occur in that zone. So it would allow a little more flexibility in there. And the last one, which is again a requirement from the state and something that we're adding, is to adopt middle housing land division standards to comply with state requirements. This could be adoption of model code verbatim or standards we develop or a combination. Clarissa's making a bit of a face, and something that she did a bit of an audit, and I'll talk a bit about this when I get to our ONA standard of the model code for middle housing land divisions versus the statute. I think it's Senate Bill 974 for it, and there's a lot of there's several discrepancies between the two. So I think we want to make sure we're developing code standards that meet the statute and not necessarily the model code. So we'll be looking at that. An example would be that the model code says that there's no appeal process, whereas the statute specifically does say that there's an appeal process. So we want to make sure we're consistent with statutory language when we develop that. But with regards to the middle housing land division, so basically what those are. So you're probably familiar with the House Bill 2001 requirement that any property that you can build a single family home on, you can also build a duplex on. And we adopted that. We were in compliance with that standard. What middle housing land divisions do is they then allow any duplex that's built through those middle housing standards to be divided. And honestly, if you're going to do one, I think you ought to do the other. It gives more home ownership opportunities to actually split the lots. It's not that much different from our, our existing standards for townhomes. But really, the major difference is going to be for these middle housing land divisions. There's a shorter timeline that staff will have to respond to, and it's just part of the bill. So I think the completeness period goes from 30 days to 21 days. And then the is it 60 days or a few
63.
more? 63 days. So from a 120-day review period to a 63-day review period. So it's short orders. They're not typically very, very work intensive projects versus some of the site design you do. But it'll put us under a little more duress to get these things out. And so the last condition was this question about zombie housing, and the comment that came back from DLCD on zombie housing was frankly kind of baffling to us, and something that our consultant and I were talking about yesterday, and when I brought it up today, Dan said the same thing that I said to them: is why don't we just stop talking? We added this strategy because it was on DLCD's menu of strategies to look at. As we're out there, we're addressing zombie housing separate of all this. So I think the idea is to maybe instead of focus on zombie housing, identify existing and proposed strategies to prevent gentrification and modify the strategy that we put in the HPS to shift focus from zombie housing management to management of stressed properties. So what happens when we have one of these properties that's been stressed, and provide coordination between code enforcement and non-profit developers such as Habitat for Humanities. So that sort of takes the zombie housing language out of the HPS. And
Zombie housing.
we will still have our code.
Everybody needs a place to live, Dan.
Yeah, that's true. There you go. So that's the current approach for that. So, and that's so that covers the what you can expect to see in the upcoming draft for HPS. So then going to the Goal 14 analysis amendment, which is another piece that'll be coming back before council in February. This is more the good news side of it. As I believe everyone in front of me is aware, and perhaps not everyone listening at home, the city did receive a grant from DLCD to pursue this urban Goal 14 analysis amendment, and it also funds us through adoption. So we'll get 3J to work on this amendment and through adoption. And basically, this is going to be this analysis to really iron down the costs of going south versus north and potentially west for our urban growth boundary expansion to meet the needs identified in our background studies. So it was a big win to get state funding for this, to get them behind it. We had some help from the governor's office in getting there. And so the idea is we provide an analysis that'll give an additional engineering cost estimate for developing of the sub areas located in exception lands, as well as additional sub areas identified in the Goal 14 analysis. So it would really be looking at those northern and western expansion areas versus the southern expansion areas. And I think that the governor's analysis or governor's office said, look, we entertain this. We don't want you going somewhere where you're going to be spending an arm and a leg to bring expand your transportation and utility systems when we're trying to, the whole point is to provide affordable housing. We just want you to show us, and which sounds like a fair ask. So that's what this process is doing. And so, considerations, cost of utility, transportation, buildability of lands will be considered in the supplemental analysis. And ultimately, we'll be looking at this question of the practicability of expansion that's discussed in OAR 660-24. That's typically interpreted to be almost an impossibility. And we're really saying, hey, is it actually practical to build, to develop, housing and have economic development in these areas? So last but not least, the ONA comments. I provided the letter that we submitted to DLCD in the packet. but basically, these are the new rules that are going to apply when, in our case, the next time we would be doing a housing needs analysis, projects that are slated to end before 2027, it doesn't apply to those municipalities, so it wouldn't apply to ours considering we're wrapping up this year. But it would apply to future, when we have to go back in 8 or so years and begin the process all over again. It would apply to us then, and so we wanted to, and also there was a couple other sort of targeted points that we wanted to make. And so basically, like I said, it won't impact this, but basically we wanted to get to this question of ambiguity that we felt we experienced with the HPS remand, where you have a set of statutes that tells you what you're supposed to, what you're supposed to turn in, and then in the review statutes, it basically gives DLCD carte blanche to decide how to evaluate your project. So some stuff comes back from them that wasn't in the document statutes, and that was extremely frustrating for us because at the very least we want to know where the ball is, and we saw a couple of instances like that in these new owner rulings, such as for the model code adoption. If we want to do something different from the model code, and I think there's really good reason that we might want to, given that what they initially proposed doesn't align with Senate Bill 974, is that can be one of these places where we submit something different and then we're subjected to all these to questions that don't really apply outside the within Senate Bill 974, and our read is that that they would have that kind of jurisdiction. So we commented on that and said, hey, look, keep it to the law. And again, those concerns that the model code is not consistent with the statute, and then the last piece, there's a rule change that would allow cities to consider financial constraints when they're deciding what properties to include in an urban reserve. So the urban reserve process is a separate process from what we're doing. It's similar to the urban growth boundary process in terms of what kind of study you have to go through, but it looks at a 50-year event horizon as opposed to a 20-year event horizon. But basically what we said is, hey, look, that's great that you're saying, hey, financial considerations need to be taken into account when you're prioritizing what lands can come into urban reserves. Let's do the same thing for our goal 14 analysis. Let's do the same thing when we're looking at urban growth boundary analysis in general, because if it's not fit to come into your urban reserve, it's not fit to come into your urban growth boundary. And with that, we dance. All right, open it to the council for questions. There's a lot there, and a lot that's coming, that's going to come back into. So, just want some feedback as we come back into this.
Commissioner Ansel.
Question, you talked about the HPS. Are you guys looking at that again? As my understanding?
We are.
Okay. Keep in mind, are you guys looking at stacked duplexes on a standard lot instead of duplexes? Because you know that's code now.
We have to do that. Yeah, we have to do that.
So you can put a fourplex on a single lot now. State code. So
That's
take that
the
into your
boundaries of
calculations. Just look into it.
Okay.
Because wherever you can put a duplex, you can put a stacked duplex, which is 4 units now on a single lot.
Oh.
So that will change your entire spectrum of housing needs if you take that into considerations. So, which doesn't help us in the underground side of things, but it's just what's being pushed. So, that's all I got for that.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? All right, I'll go next. When Mr. Corthell brought this to us about getting the grant, he brought up that it sounded like we were going to be doing everything in-house. When did it change? We were going to go back to using 3J.
I think what he meant by that, is for the HPS and Goal 14 analysis, 3J actually managed the grant directly through DLCD. So it's the grant management that's happening in-house, not the document preparation.
Okay.
So it'll be 3J, yeah, we still are employing 3J for that, and also working with Dyer Partnerships, our engineer of record, to create the cost estimate. They'll be doing a substantial amount of that.
Okay.
That piece.
Okay. And then my other question was, this year when we were at the LOC conference, their legislative update, they brought up Senate Bill 974, which was a bill that I helped fight because it was not right in any way, shape, or form. And one of the things they brought up was the final draft that got approved was not to take away time from the city's process on development. Is that incorrect? Because it sounded like you brought up it was like 60 days now from the 120.
They were looking at all timelines for land use decisions at that time. They were looking at reducing the timelines for design reviews, subdivision reviews, etc. And it was different. Yeah, there was different stuff in that they took out. But for middle housing, they still have these abridged timelines.
So when you say abridged timelines, they lowered the timelines?
That's correct. Now it's 21 and 63 instead of 30 and 120. They're tight, but they're not impossible. The stuff that they had previously would have been entirely impossible to meet. I want to say it was like a 45-day review, which wouldn't even allow for notice and a hearing for design reviews, and it was preposterous. So they did take that up, but not for middle housing land divisions.
So the one thing I would like to ask that is if we get an abundance of development coming into you guys and you're getting overwhelmed, I would like to know about it.
1000%. Appreciate that.
And I'd like to remind council, this bill especially is the reason why I want to get us I'd like to see our city get a lobbyist, because LOC dropped the ball. There's a lot of people who dropped the ball on this, and I got to it late. I couldn't keep up with everything with my day job, but having somebody that keeps an eye on this kind of stuff at the legislature, so we have more of a chance to fight and get other cities involved. This is a direct attack on our home rule charter. And these things aren't gonna end. And our timelines are not getting any bigger to keep an eye on what is getting passed down at the Ivory Palace. So I know the conversation's gonna be coming up, I think, at goal setting regarding looking into some sort of lobbyist group that can keep an eye on stuff like this for our city. And there's several different ways of formulating it, but this is very, very frustrating because LOC made this sound like there was they saved the timelines, but the one thing they did say we lost was it type 2 or type 3 hearings? We lost.
Not necessarily.
Okay, they did bring up that we lost some form of hearings when it came to what the planning commission could do on some of this stuff.
I think that flushed back.
Yeah, I think that once we looked at the law wasn't clear.
It wasn't clear.
Okay.
That's the short answer. The law wasn't clear, and we still have our type 3 hearings. But,
you're good, Dan. We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
But your mic's not on.
Oh.
You can hear me anyway?
Yeah.
So one of the things that with that is that the law wasn't clear, and then the reinterpretation of it was we got those back to go back to the planning commission.
Okay.
That's what you're talking about. But the other thing I think I would like to add to this is, fortunately or unfortunately, Clarissa and Dan had to listen to me talk about land use today, and it was very intriguing, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
It was a good chat.
It was enlightening. So I do want to tell you that there's a couple of things that's going on here, because Commissioner Ansel brought something up that I think we're dealing with, and that is, you can build a duplex on a single family lot, but now you can build a fourplex, right? But what happens at the state level is none of this ever considers what's under the ground, the water and the sewer and the storm drainage and the transportation and all the things, because they've never done it, okay? They haven't done that work. The people in BLCD have not done that work before, we know that. And it's no different today than it was way back in the day when I started. Okay, it's the same today as it was back then. There's just a lot more rules out there, and they change all the time. And Dan and Clarissa are doing a really good job of trying to sift through that, and it's almost impossible most of the time because they don't balance out, they don't equal, and frankly, some of it just doesn't make any sense. And it's very hard for them to do their job correctly under these circumstances. I mean, I'm surprised today that, you know, back in the day when I started, cottage housing was a new thing. Guess what? It's now new again. I guess I've been around too long. It's come back around in circle, kind of like when clothes come back in style. So that's part of what we're experiencing here. It's like we can do this and we can do that. But the other thing to remember is some of these rules, as they talked about, the 40 units per acre for R3 zoning, are we going to get something like that here? Is it really going to impact us at a great level? Probably not. Probably not. You know, and whether we talk about zombie housing or not, let's just not talk about it if it creates a problem. So we're just not going to talk about it. And none of that made any sense to me either. So, you know, what do you do? But we do need to serve the community today and in the future. And however we can come at this to do the right thing for the community, then we need to do that all along, making sure that we remind the state of Oregon that people need water and sewer and storm drainage, and it needs to be clean, it needs to be efficient, and all those things that we have to do, because it's not part of the housing decisions that the legislature is making. They are not including that in any of their decisions.
And something I wanted to add on to that. So at the recent Clackamas County Planning Directors meeting, to a man, basically every planning director at that meeting, you know, because Clackamas County organized it, but our rep Kelly Reed was on the call. To a man, every planning director there said, "Slow down, stop throwing this stuff at us. We can't keep up." So this isn't just impacting us. We could take solace in that. Everyone is saying that right now. Everyone in Clackamas County is saying. The other piece is that with regards to the ONA comments, there ended up being some things that I sort of targeted the comments that I made to sort of Molalla interests and some points that have sort of come to us. League of Oregon City submitted a very solid comment letter to that. So I think they're starting, and based on some conversations we've had with them, they're starting to be keen to it. So I wouldn't completely rule them out as far as a lobbying entity. You know, not to make a comment one way or another on whether we need a lobbyist, but I wouldn't necessarily rule them out, because I think they're starting to get, wake up to some of the stuff that their constituents are saying, and it's not just us.
No.
Thank you for being nice to them. Yes, sir.
I have a question. So, you know, we're kind of analyzing all this data again. You know, we had comments, you know, regarding the different Portland State studies. Are we locked into one particular? Is that part of that analysis? Do we have any potential to look at other data, or are we only looking at some of the proposed changes and some of the discussion from the previous meeting?
Are you talking about with regards, like the HA population estimates that these gentlemen brought up? My understanding, and this is with my conversations with DLCD so far, there may be other conversations to be had, is that to revise the population estimates that we used in our housing needs analysis would mean to basically start the process over with them. With that said, I don't disagree with many of the points these gentlemen brought up. They bring up some good points. The issue is and I think it's probably why DLCD guides this way, whether it's in law or not. But is that it sort of otherwise it sort of creates this moving target. You know, the trends could change. You know, for years and years, Molalla grew fairly steadily. Over the past couple of years, Mollalla's and Oregon's growth has tapered a bit. But who's to say what trends the future holds as well? So then we do that, and then all of a sudden we have a study where the population is moving forward again. So I think they try to avoid a moving target.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
You know, through this whole process, it seems as though they keep changing the rules and bending things or whatever. Do you anticipate any other changes coming up? Any other wrenches thrown at us?
I anticipate more wrenches being thrown at us.
Yeah.
I can't tell you which ones.
Many of them, and they'll be thrown harder.
I guess this is just as much a statement as a question.
You know, the other thing, and this is more of an opinion of mine, but I think the other thing with housing is that's really difficult for us with these rules and some of the things is that we know that in Molalla, the new apartments that have been built in town. Sorry for making you cry, Dan. They're struggling. They're struggling to keep them full. Okay.
Really?
So if we continue, if we're already experiencing some of that, and we're continuing to push for additional housing, I don't know who's going to live in it. And so that's part of the slowing down thing that you're hearing. It's the same way, you know, when I'm with the city managers in Clackamas County, might as well be planning directors. So it's the same thing everywhere. We're not saying anything that that other cities aren't talking about. So.
Anybody else? Going once? Going twice? All right. Well, thank you for your wonderful presentation. Appreciate you both coming in. And if there isn't anything else for the good of the order, I will adjourn this meeting at 7:27.
Everyone's lost.